Well, welcome to everybody joining us this afternoon. We are so pleased to have you here and to this session on learning about and dealing with systemic racism in the church. We're pleased to partner with our friends at ChurchNext and the course producer, Liz, who is going to be leading our session on behalf of the Episcopal Parish Network. We thank you for joining us and we thank our panelists for being part of this. Please do add your comments and your questions in the chat feature. And we'd appreciate it if, just so our panelists can get to know you, you would put your name and where you are dialing in from in the chat feature as well. So thanks very much. And now I'm going to turn it over to Liz.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to be talking today about a course that ChurchNext, for which I produce online courses, has produced called Becoming Beloved Community, Understanding Systemic Racism. And we're going to be talking about what this resource is, what we were trying to achieve by building it. We've got Dr. Ivy Forsythe-Brown from the University of Michigan at Dearborn here, and she was one of the course instructors. And we have Dave Guilfoyle, the Reverend Dave Guilfoyle, who and Diana Alm and Caroline Christman, who are all going to be here to talk about how they used this course to build understanding about systemic racism in their communities and on their own, because the course can be used for individual or group education. And I kind of wanted to make sure that both types of experience were represented. So first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about ChurchNext and what it is. We're at churchnext.tv, and we are an online Christian education group run out of the Episcopal Church. We are a ministry of forward movement, and our goal is to find some of the interesting ideas and voices going on, some of the discussions going on in the church, find experts to talk about what, bring their expertise and their knowledge to whatever the course happens to be about, and to create courses, which you can then bring into your parish life. A lot of them are designed to be Christian formation meeting length. So we were aware of the need for online Christian education concerning systemic racism, and in particular, concerning the Episcopal Church's role in systemic racism, because that is less often addressed. The Reverend Tom Ferguson was the other instructor for the course, and he has an entire session on the Episcopal Church's complicity with systemic racism, the way the Episcopal Church has enabled systemic racism, and what the Becoming Beloved Community movement is sort of rising out of, what kind of, what needs healing, and what we're trying to achieve in light of the Episcopal Church's history with this issue. So we saw a need for a course dealing with systemic racism and dealing with systemic racism in the church, and we were very fortunate and grateful to receive a Becoming Beloved Community grant to build the course. And so we, Dr. Forsythe-Brown and Tom Ferguson and Chris Yaw, who is the director of ChurchNext, and I worked with a videographer at the cathedral in Detroit. They were very kind to give us the loan of the building. And we built a course from that. And Dr. Forsythe-Brown is here. She's going to talk more about the content and aims, the way we sort of formatted the course and why we formatted the course the way we did.
That's to me, right?
Yes.
Welcome, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you and talk about this course. The course that we've developed on building beloved community and kind of looking at and understanding systemic racism is based on a course that I've taught for about 20 years in higher ed at a variety of universities. It is part of a larger body of content in the curriculum of race and ethnicity and sociology, and the social construction of race, and how race and race relations and dominant minority group relations operate within societies. So this has been a very challenging, and I'm glad that the course is successful and that we kind of put it in the can and got it done. It is 6 sessions. Some of you might think 6 sessions is a bit long. I normally use 16 weeks to cover material related to this topic. So 6 sessions that are about a half hour, or so long is a brief kind of introduction into the topic. I kind of focused primarily on some of the social historical development of our current society. So there's a lot of history in the course, as you guys may know. I'm, challenging you on your high school history and college history courses that you might have taken. But it's, for sociology, we get more into, well, why were certain events the events that they were historically? What did they mean at that particular time? What was the larger social context? What was the intent? And then, of course, what is the outcome? So the 6 sessions, we try to cover a lot. Tom Ferguson, as Liz was mentioning, covers one predominant section that is on how race in the church operates, and I'm doing kind of the rest of it with the history background. I don't know, Liz, is there anything else you want to know specifically about it, or that I should talk about?
You've covered some of the stuff that I should have mentioned at the beginning. The course is free. The course is 6 roughly half-hour sessions of video. There is a version of the course for individuals and a version of the course for groups. Caroline, I believe, took the course. Caroline Christman took the course for individuals, and Dave took it for groups, or led it for groups. Diana, if I understood you correctly, I believe that you took it for individuals, but with others, which is another way that sometimes people choose to interact with these courses. So the For Individuals course allows you to quiz yourself on some of the main points and allows you to participate in discussion with people from across the world on this issue. There has been robust discussion, which is always, one of the great gifts of the technology that we've got today. It's not just for insulting people's tweets. This is the way that this technology should be used. It's one of the reasons I really like what we're doing at ChurchNext, is people from across the world can engage in real topics in a respectful way. I have never seen disrespectful discussion in a ChurchNext class, and they can really get into the issues. We try to ask challenging questions as well as questions that just are sort of, what did you think? We try to sort of challenge your ideas and push you to examine your own biases, what do you bring to this? And I think we've had some really excellent discussions. We've had 500-ish people the number changes a lot, take the course for individuals, and at least 50 groups. And I don't really know what that means in terms of how many people are actually seeing it, because a group can be 3 people or it can be 50. It sort of depends on how the church chooses to use it. But the For Groups class comes with a facilitator's guide so that anyone can lead. And that one is specifically formatted with sensitive discussion in mind, so that people don't accidentally let emotions sort of get them heated up and start speaking disrespectfully to each other. And there's summaries of the course material. There's the discussion questions. There's everything you need to lead it in the group. You don't need a professional moderator. Anyone can lead. That's sort of the point. And then, of course, we have the content, Dr. Forsythe-Brown and the Reverend Ferguson's content. And they're designed roughly to be you could probably accommodate it in one Christian formation meeting, depending on how chatty your discussion groups tend to get. Ours get very chatty, but so Ivy, I guess I was interested in hearing a little bit more about when we were creating the course, we selected the material. We couldn't discuss all of racial history in America, or even all of racial history in the church in the amount of time, we had time limitations placed on us. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about how you selected the history. You managed to pack so much into that class. It's impressive. It's got the density of gold. So how did you select what to talk about? You weren't trying to be comprehensive. So what were you doing? How did you select the blocks that you did?
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. That's a good question. I have to say first that this was probably one of the most challenging things that I've done in a while. Teaching a course that's with a regular academic semester is a lot easier. We have plenty of time to go through. There's a lot of, thought and focus into what to cover each week, but to then kind of condense all of that down and try to put it into like 3 hours or so was a bit challenging. I did have a previous encounter of doing this. So about 5 years ago, I was asked by the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan to do a course on race and privilege, which is basically the same content that the systemic racism course takes. But I did it for the convention. It was a pre-convention course. It was very well attended. We thought 40 people were going to show up, and basically we had a room of 200 people from the diocese that showed up. So it was wonderful. But it was my first stab at kind of condensing that information from the semester into a more compressed time. For the ChurchNext course, I focused on the pivot points. So beyond the introduction and some of the definitions that are in session 1, which for me as an instructor, I feel is very important for us to have a common understanding of some of the terms that we're going to be using throughout the rest of the course. Then it's like kind of moving through history, but moving at key points that have really shaped the current society that we're living in. And so that's the only way I could think of organizing it in a way. It's different from the way I would teach it at the university. It has a little bit more of my personal reflections in it, a little bit more of because it's a church course, it's connected more to what we should be doing in the church, how we should be relating to each other as children of God. So I'm really kind of pushing more of myself as a parishioner a little bit more, matched with what I do as an academic. There's lots of things I could put in. There's tons of things I took out because we just didn't have time to cover it. Liz, you were very helpful in the construction of the class, and some of the earlier ones that we put it in the can and we're like, you're like, you could explain this a little bit more. You could go here a little bit more. When I am teaching, I frequently, it's very funny because some faculty don't like students to have their laptops or their phones out when they're teaching. I encourage the laptops and the phones because I want the students to be able to Google and fact check and get more information at any given moment. So pretty much anything that I'm saying in the course, I'm trying to be brief, but if you want more information, just Google it and you'll get tons of background and take a deeper dive if you want more.
I wanted to go a little bit into how the course is organized. The first session discusses the course in connection with the Becoming Beloved Community project. And it defines some specific terms because the word racism is a big word, and we wanted everyone to be clear about the tools that we were using, the language tools we were using to, so that everyone was on the same page about what we were doing. The second and third blocks were about specific moments, and Ivy, you can correct me if I misstate some of this, specific moments in relation to systemic racism in the United States, that were very pivotal and or were really good illustrations about how systemic racism was deliberately engineered to create a white supremacy system.
Yes.
Session 4 is entirely Tom Ferguson. He talks about the Episcopal Church's history with systemic racism. And sessions 5 and 6 are about what you can do in your community and what churches can do in the world to try, you can't fix systemic racism, but you can begin to work toward healing and begin to work toward greater understanding. There's a lot of discussion of resources, a really in-depth discussion of some really excellent resources in both of those sessions, and ways that churches can interact productively to try and become beloved community where they are. Ivy, did I leave anything major out?
No, not really. I'm looking at some of the questions and comments that are in the chat. And there seems to be a discussion about sacred ground and how this may or may be different or similar to or congruent with sacred ground. I am less familiar with sacred ground and its, content. So if you want to deal with that, Liz, that would be helpful. But I can say that I believe that this course is maybe more foundational, that if you are starting a process either individually or in the group, like with a church, to address some of these issues, you may want to start with the 6-session course, because it kind of lays some of the historical foundation of how we got to where we are and why we may have some of these persisting social inequalities that are here. And also a little bit on how we can address it. That may lead to some other things. I believe a lot of the things that I'm suggesting, and as far as other resources, are history-based. It's like really understanding what our history is, not what we were taught in high school, because sometimes depending on what high school you went to or who was teaching the class, it's not as comprehensive as it could be, but really presenting a very unvarnished approach to what our history was and why things are the way they are.
And how to, I saw several questions about sacred ground, and I think this is sort of designed to be, as Ivy said, a bit more introductory than that. If I were going to bring this to a church that was wanting to begin this conversation, I would start with this class. Sacred ground is more intense, goes into more depth. This brings up some really good introductory points and gives you a starting place. It also, sacred ground is one of the resources we recommend to, for where you might move from there. Now, I have had comments from people who have taken sacred ground and who got a lot out of the course. So it's certainly not something where if you've taken sacred ground, this is all redundant. But sacred ground, if I were going to organize it, I would put this and then sacred ground. It was designed to be kind of step 1 to their step 2, and also the many books that we have and the many other resources that we have, sort of opening a door into that world.
The only thing I would add to that is that this is a process. It's a long process. We didn't get to where we are overnight. This is a 400-year social construction of our society, and we're not going to dismantle it overnight either. And we're not going to change ourselves and how we are dealing with other people overnight. So I want people to be a little bit more gracious with themselves and, where they're moving, and if you're going to do this as a congregation, take it slow, but social change is a long process. Individual change is a long process. We know that. So don't think that, you take one class and then you're, making these radical kind of changes. That's not how this is going to work out. For the Diocese of Michigan, the first workshop that I told you I did about 5 years ago, that started it was for the Waters of Reconciliation was the theme. That theme continued in the diocese for the next 3 years. So it was a 4-year total where we were addressing the issue in various aspects of inclusion for a long period of time. And I think that it kind of planted the seed well within the diocese for parishes to kind of continue and individuals to continue their own work.
This is definitely produced and intended to be a first step rather than sort of everything you would need to do. It's not at all sort of set out that way in the course. And I'd like to turn now to, I had seen the questions to get some nuts and bolts out of the way. I had seen the question, can people still join the class? This is a pre-recorded class and it will be available for a very long time. So it's both free and both for individuals and for groups courses will be available indefinitely. You can join whenever. So we encourage you to take it and enjoy it as you go on. I'd like to start with Caroline Christman. If you would please say where you're from, what your parish is, and how you use the course.
Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today. So I am from Durham, North Carolina, and my home parish is Church of the Holy Family in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So as Liz mentioned, I did do the course as an individual. I tend to do better with these kinds of concepts and these kinds of difficult concepts kind of on my own first. I like to be able to kind of learn, digest, and then come back to a group and talk about it. I think that I was really pleased with how the course was set up into chunks that I could, again, with me, the refrain is alone and digest. It's a really hard concept, right? It's, Ivy, what you said about, this takes time to change, and it takes time for individuals to change and time for society to change. I think being on the side of, the white privilege side, it's a very bitter pill to swallow, right? It's hard to say, yes, this church that I've grown up in my whole life was complicit in a lot of these structures that have been, put together in our society. And it's really a challenge to confront it. And I think the way that it's handled in this course is amazing. It is so compassionate and it is so understanding, and it helps to, me, a person who was willing to do it, and a person who might be less willing to do it, hearing this message, it might help them to know that they can kind of let their guard down a little bit. And it really was so thought-provoking. And because it's recorded, I'm going to be able to go back to it over and over and over, which I will definitely do just because, that's how I process. So, I think this will absolutely inform, though, how I talk with people, how I communicate with people, and how I will kind of be able to contribute back in my parish to this overall, very important issue that my parish is definitely very focused on and very interested in. So
it can also be if the parish I go to has already kind of, a lot of them have done the Sacred Ground course. If you're trying to catch up with a group that's already sort of doing some of the stuff that we recommend in the course, they've taken Sacred Ground. The church I go to is already examining the land one of the things that Tom and Ivy both recommend in the course is examining the land that your church is on and your specific, the history of that land and the history of your parish in relation to race. And our parish is already doing that. So it was very helpful, I think, for some people to have access to the Becoming Beloved community class so that they could kind of catch up. So that can be another way that a four individuals class might be helpful.
You said that perfectly. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes, I have felt very much behind the curve with the rest of my congregation, and it can feel a little, nerve-wracking to try to catch up and to join the crowd who's already made such great strides. So yeah, having this opportunity to kind of work through it on my own and then join my group was really nice. Thank you for mentioning that.
Caroline, thank you so much. Diana, you, I believe, took the four individuals class with a few other people, but it wasn't the four groups one. Do I have that correct?
Right, it was an individual one, yeah.
So can you tell me where you're from, what your parish is, and how you used the course and the impact that you felt that it had?
Thank you. I'd like to say thank you, first of all, to ChurchNext and also the Episcopal Church for doing this class, and putting it out there, publicizing it, and also in doing this freely. The fact that it was free allowed me to go out and tell people about, when I was telling them about it, you can take this class. I need to give you some background though. I belong to Trinity Lutheran Church in Moline, Illinois. And we have used your ChurchNext stuff, our programs before. Usually when we don't have another program in mind, either to do, ourselves, or we're in a college town, and Augustana College, a Lutheran college, is right there in our town, and so we can gain live speakers periodically. However, sometimes we don't have those, and so we use a ChurchNext program, and we've been very happy with the videos that we've watched, with the program. And and this class was excellent. And Ivy, I will say to you, your presentations were excellent. I made it a point of watching all of the videos. I did not read all of the text yet. But what I did that was a little bit different than the way the class was really laid out to be handled was, I don't have any qualifications to be leading this. I don't feel like I don't have a PhD in sociology like Ivy or, people that, I'm not even Episcopal after all. But I do have an interest in Black history, the problems of racism, that sort of thing that I've had for a long time. I will mention that it didn't really hit home until about 2005 or so when I read Sundown Towns. And that came as a low blow because I'm in the North. Illinois, I live in Northern Illinois, and I never dreamed that there was such racism in Illinois, a northern state. So that was the first thing. And then, what was the other one? Something else. Anyway, so anyway, when I saw this thing publicized, that it was a free class, put out by ChurchNext, which I had some experience with, I thought, this is my chance to put together something. And I didn't really want to put it together as a class because our adult ed program at Trinity has been kind of wavering even before COVID came. But now that we've gone through 2 years of COVID, it's kind of non-existent right now. And I didn't want to put together a course like we've had before, because we had kind of a following that the same people would come all the time. And that wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for a group of people that could say, hey, the race is a problem that we need to talk about. And those people are different from the people that had been coming to our classes. And I didn't know who they were. So what I did was in early March, right after I saw the presentation or the ad suggesting this, that you take it either as a group or as individuals, I thought we should do this as individuals on your own time and then come together afterwards and meet and talk about this. And so that's what we're doing. So I set it up early in March to be that it was the news there, the newsletter every week about it being, the meeting was going to be sometime after Easter. I didn't want to do it during Easter, during Lent and all that stuff. It's too complicated then. So I thought I'll do it right after Easter. And I did. 2 days after Easter was our meeting. But anyway, they kept getting reminders and a link to so that they could go and sign up. Other people could sign up. It turned out I had 5 people from our church, including me. So 4 other people and a friend of one of them who came from another church in Davenport. I will mention we are right on the border. Rock Island is right on the Mississippi River on the east side, and Davenport, Iowa is on the other side. And Illinois and Iowa cannot be farther away from each other than 2 states can possibly be. But anyway, so I didn't really know until like a week before who was coming or if anybody was going to come. And I didn't want to be teaching about it. I didn't want to be preaching. I don't have any qualifications to teach anybody about this. So I,
Did you enjoy it?
Did I enjoy it? Yeah, well, I did. Oh, I was going to tell you about the first, we had one meeting, okay. And that meeting, what I wanted to happen was for the group to decide, okay, now I've got an idea of what this is all about. I'm aware now, or do I want to continue? Do I want to continue studying, continue reading? And that's what they decided they want to do. And that's what I wanted. That's what I was hoping they would decide to do, and they did. And so we've got a meeting set up for May 17th. And we're going to move on. The topic was the topic that we covered on the 19th of April was where we came from. What were our parents like? How did we grow up? What was our community like where we grew up? And we spent probably an hour and a half of our 2-hour meeting talking about that individually. And then after that, we talked about, well, where do we go from here? Are we going to continue this or not? We talked about that a little bit. That's where we're at right now. We're not very far along. And you talk about, you guys are, talking about it in terms of structure and everything. And I'm leaving it kind of loosely ended, open-ended and loosely put together so that we can go week or session by session. Do we want to continue with this? And hopefully it will lead to doing something. Because so often, so many of the education programs in our church have been, as good as they are, they never lead to doing. You learn things, they're interesting. It's fun to listen to somebody from Augustana, for instance, a college professor talk about something religious. It's interesting, but they never lead to action. And I thought, I want this to lead to some sort of an action, as small as it might be. We're not going to solve the racism problem, in our lifetime at all, but at least we can make a dent in it. And I guess I'm hoping to make one small dent at Trinity Lutheran in Moline, if I can. One of the members of our group did say this about how we should publicize this to other people in our group, because that's where we're hoping to get to, to get more people involved in this. And I'm not quite sure. I think I got the five people that are interested in talking about it together, but how we're going to go out and get other people involved, I really don't know. I think one word that was used quite a bit in your materials was apathy. And I think people are apathetic. It doesn't affect me. And I spent most of my life thinking that it doesn't affect me. And so I didn't pay much attention to it until after sundown towns came along. Anyway, but somebody in our group said this, if we're talking to somebody else, we can emphasize that we only have control over our own thoughts, our personal view of racism. We will not try to change others, but we can ask others to examine their own backgrounds and feelings about other races so that they can learn to recognize how and why they think as they do. And that's the extent of what we can do. We cannot try to convince them of anything. And so that's kind of where our group is right now. And I suggested studying about the Jim Crow Acts, because I think the Jim Crow Acts were the laws that really have most of the Blacks in this country angry. And why did those things happen? And why did people not speak up about getting rid of them sooner than, was it 1964 or something? They should they should not have been in effect, but why did they last so long? And I think the Blacks have a right to be angry about that. So that's my introduction, I guess.
Thanks so much, Diane. I really appreciate this. You pointed out a couple of things that I really wanted to emphasize, which one of the things that we try to do with all the ChurchNext courses, and in particular with this one, is make it very adaptable. So I love how you kind of are taking the resource and adapting it to what you need. We have the moderator's guide, the facilitator's guide, the participants guide in the 4 groups classes. And a couple people had asked if you could use this instead of a hybrid way, like if you could have people at home watch the course, watch the videos, and then come and discuss it. That actually, I think, would be a great way to do it, because then you'd have time to really get into the discussion. And as Diana said, to maybe talk about activities based on the discussion, or maybe talk about what you're going to do next to learn more about that particular issue. So I think that the way you used it is very creative and very adaptive, and the way that we really want people to be using ChurchNext classes in general, this class in particular. Dave, you used the 4 groups version, I believe, with your church. Can you please say where you're from and how you used the course and what you got out of it?
Sure, thanks. My church is in Oxford, Ohio, which is just north of Cincinnati. It's a college town. Miami of Ohio is a liberal arts college. They're just north of Cincinnati. I'm the deacon there, and last year I was at a clergy conference. We were talking a lot about the Sacred Ground groups and about engaging in the beloved community answering the call from Bishop Curry. And so I've been thinking about my own church and very liberal, progressive Christians who were engaged in civil rights movements in the 60s and 70s. And I think, we have an attitude that, well, yeah, we know about racism. And then I was on the ChurchNext website because I use it quite a bit for formation for other things when this course came out. And I thought, oh, this looks like a nice first stepping stone. And it has been very good. We're a week away from completing it. I have about 6 to 10. We meet on Sunday morning before church for about an hour. We watch a video. We engage in about a half an hour conversation. And then, of course, there's talk during the week. But I think that what really surprised a lot of people in the group was, we live in Ohio, which is like the gateway for the Underground Railroad, came through Cincinnati. We consider ourselves pretty liberal, but the systemic nature of racism and our involvement in that, just by being part of a society, that history was really, really helpful in making us take another look. It's not very far from Cincinnati to a town that was a sundown town in as late as the 40s. And my mother talked about it. And, the generation, I'm 66 years old. Many people in my generation have no idea that kind of racism was so close to cities that consider themselves pretty progressive and pretty liberal. It has been really, really helpful, much better than I thought. The facilitator's guide has a lot of great questions. I very seldom get to use them because the conversations start immediately after we stop the video. And I just ask the group, well, what struck you? We could go for a long time. It's been really helpful. I think if the church that you're involved in is thinking about the Sacred Ground circles, this is an excellent way to get somebody involved in it. Whether you're trying to form those circles, as I hope to do next year, or whether you've got some involvement and then somebody's coming into the church and wants to move into the work that you're doing in Sacred Ground, it really is an excellent course for that kind of introduction. You may think you know about racism, but I guarantee you sit through the first 4 weeks of that, and you'll come out with a much different attitude.
Thanks so much, Dave. I want to get to some of the questions that I've seen. Megan asks, is this curriculum geared toward multiracial groups? I can say that we were careful to develop the discussion questions and a lot of the content with the idea of giving people an opportunity to share their experiences with racial oppression and to talk about it from both the perspective of white viewpoints and the people of color viewpoint. Ivy, you can talk a little bit about the lectures and what you were thinking about in terms of who was going to use it and whether it was geared toward multiracial groups as you created the video content.
Yes. Yes. I mean,
Right?
you know, like to be succinct. All of the content is meant for multiracial groups, not just for, people of European ancestry or what have you. And the reason why I can say that is because many people, even though you're from a particular racial or ethnic group, that doesn't mean you know the history or that you understand the context of some of the things that happened to that particular group. And so it's very informative for everybody. As I've taught, this content for the past 20 years, I've had African Americans and Latino students and Native American students and Asian students, both immigrant and non-immigrant students, all be enriched by understanding what's going on, what has happened here, how this applies to their group. But it also suggests that systemic racism, while we're seeing it within the context of the African American experience mostly because it was really specific and a legacy that comes after our wonderful experience with slavery, but it's broader than that. There was just as much discrimination and exclusion to Latinos as there were to Asians. I mean, there's a reason why there was a Chinatown concentrated in San Francisco. I do believe I mentioned this in the session, that after the railroad was completed and a lot of Asian men were used and some women in that connection of making the western side of the railroad system, people settled. I mean, you're in Wyoming. It's like, why go all the way back to California, or whatever? And they settled, but they weren't allowed to stay. That's part of it. It's like, no, you need to move. You can't stay here. This is for this particular group, not for you. And you need to move. And they got moved all the way back to the coast, to the Seattle area, to San Francisco area, and so forth. I mean, so this applies to a lot of groups. There's history for everybody that's here, and it helps us to get a more comprehensive understanding of what happened. And I mean, I also talk about, at one point, I think I mentioned the book of Are Italians White? Like, that was a real thing for a minute, right? And it was a long minute. It wasn't a short minute. It was a long historical moment until really post World War II that starts to shift and change. So yeah, there's a lot.
The Are Italians White section was absolutely fascinating, and it's really I've thought about that a lot since we built the course. I had no idea about that, and it was fascinating to hear what you had to say about that. Valerie asks, what would you say comes after the course for a parish to combat systemic racism? I think the course is pretty much sort of that. It talks about different, I mean, I think Diana and Dave have both talked about how you might turn the course into an active place to sort of bring action. You might turn it into a reading group to help you figure out what action you want to take by exploring further resources. You might move it into a sacred ground group. There's a lot of places you could go with this. And so that's sort of between the curriculum, which talks a lot about ways that parishes can address, what they can do next, and your own sort of preferences, your own creativity. I love that Dave's groups just take the questions and run with them. Our questions are suggestions to help people get moving. People talk about what they want to talk about and then sort of build from there. Let's see.
I also, Liz, just let me jump
please.
in. I dropped in the chat. I mean, I think may be part of that answer to that question that you just had. There's a book that is Speaking of Race, I believe is the title. It's by Celeste Headley. It's a little bit more practical as far as what if somebody's making racist comments? What do you do? That kind of, you know, practical engagement. To combat systemic racism, it is changing hearts and minds one person at a time. That's what this is. We've done the large work. We've tried to change the laws. And now it's about how people are viewing other people. And so that now means that everybody's empowered with their engagement with others. Allowing nasty, derogatory, racist comments to go unchecked just gives more life and air to them, and says it's okay. So I think people have a lot of power. I don't think that this needs to be something that is a organized social activism kind of thing that needs to happen, and that's the only way that you see whether or not this was successful. It really is, can you talk to your own family members about this issue? And can you tell, you know, cousin so-and-so or uncle so-and-so or whoever it is who is making these type of comments that I would really prefer that you didn't. And that's, or this is inaccurate information that you're using or what have you. The Speaking of Race book will help. It's a little bit more applicable in that way.
Megan asks what I think the ideal group size is. And I think that there is no ideal group size. You can have a big group. I would say that if you have like over 10 people, or depending on how chatty everybody is, maybe even smaller than that, you might want to break it into smaller groups, because then people will have a chance to talk and a chance to sort of share viewpoints.
Can I address that just real quickly?
Yeah, please, Dave, go ahead.
My experience is if you have a short period of time, say 45 minutes after this film section is over, you've got to have a group that's no more than 10 people, because otherwise not everyone's going to have a chance. If you have a large group, it's been my experience, say you have 20 people, you might want to have someone, if it's not yourself, someone who's got some training as a moderator, and you need to have more time, because you will have, because this is some of this material is going to be new, even to people who think that it's not going to be, and it takes some thought. And you'll have quiet people in the back of the room whose ideas are really valuable, but who will not speak up unless they have time to process, and unless you have somebody looking around the room and seeing who they are.
That might also be some of the value of a hybrid class, because then you could have people, if you meet in person and talk about it and then continue the conversation online, or if you have some sessions online and some sessions in person, or if you have people watch the videos and think and process. These are longer videos than most of the ChurchNext classes videos that usually they're about 5 minutes. These are 25 to 30 minutes. So they don't fit quite as easily into a Christian formation thing with all the discussion questions. So turning it into a kind of hybrid moment like that is a great way to sort of accommodate COVID concerns, and a very good way to maximize time. And, you know, you hear about visual learners, auditory learners, and kinesthetic learners. You're getting people who might prefer to write than to speak, or people who might prefer acting to listening. There's a lot of listening with the videos. So trying to accommodate lots of styles, I think hybrid ministry is a great way to do that. And these courses definitely lend themselves to that. What kind of response have we had from folks in conservative parishes? I haven't really received, I mean, no one has said, we took this course and we're a conservative parish, so I'm not sure. The responses we've got have been generally positive. We did have a couple of people writing and saying that talking about race is divisive, but that was like one outlier. Mostly the comments have been about, if you're taking the course, I think you're open to learning about, you're sort of taking these steps to kind of learn more. So we have not had, and I think conservative parishes are sometimes open to that. I think that, you know, the world is growing and changing and people are trying to ask these questions. So I'm hoping that people from conservative parishes are getting a lot out of it. Let's see, I'm trying to get to more questions. The book of the, Martha asks if we can say the name of the book and author again, the Celeste. Whoa, Ivy put it in the chat, great. Wow, there's a lot of questions. Have any other denominations shown interest in or have a way to hear about this course? We try, I mean, Diana's Lutheran. We have a good partnership going with a lot of different Lutheran churches. And a lot of this is word of mouth and we're trying to get people more aware of it. So some, yes. How do the formats of the 4 individuals and 4 groups courses differ? The 4 individuals course is you read a little introduction, you watch the video, you take a little quiz, just, it's not like a graded quiz, it's a self-assessment. And then you participate in discussion questions with people, you know, we have people in the Philippines taking these classes. We have people in England, we have people all across America. So you've got a wide variety of viewpoints coming in. And you go through it that way. The 4 groups course is mostly on the online content is the videos, and then you can download a participant's guide and a 4 groups, a participant's guide and a 4 facilitators guide. The idea is that if you don't happen to have trained moderators around, somebody can pick up this, you know, there's a format that you can follow. It recommends it. You obviously do not have to follow it, but it gives you jumping off point. It gives you opening prayers. It gives you the order that you might find, the materials you might need, the order you might follow, how you might manage discussions, things like that. And those are kind of the 2 different approaches. There's a question in the Q&A. Does the content include theological and or scriptural reflections, or is it a mostly sociological and historical perspective? It does include blocks 1 and 4 talk specifically about a theological perspective. A lot of it is historical, but particularly block 1 sort of talks about the church's call and the reason that we're engaging in the material at all from a Christian point of view. Am I missing any questions? Like, there were a lot. I don't think I have missed any questions. If I have, I'm going to put my email address in the chat. Feel free to email me with any questions. I want to thank everyone for being here. Ivy, do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap up about, you know, responses that you've seen or ideas you'd like to leave people with?
Just that I'm really pleased that this this course is being well received. It's an introduction, as we've discussed before. I'm really happy for anybody to take it. Like I said, this is a long process. When I'm teaching the course, my expectations are to move people just a very small place. It's just, if you can accept some of this and think about it and think about how you may engage with other people, fine, that's it. That's all that's necessary at this stage. There'll be other courses or other material or other engagements that you'll have that may further you down in the process. The point is for us to be beloved community, to be together, to eliminate systemic racism, but racism in general, which is keeping portions of our population from contributing fully to the society. We are less because we are separated. And that to me is problematic. So I really commend everybody for being here in this session and thinking about the course. I think you'll enjoy it. So that's it.
I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank our panelists for showing up and sharing your experiences with this. It really meant a lot. And Ivy, of course, thank you for everything you've given to this class. It's been an incredible experience working with you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.